Do y'all remember Saints Row? This is one of my favorite games back in the day, and I remember I always used to beg my dad to install it to my PC because I was just a little kid and didn't know how to do that, and when he did, I would literally play this game for days. But out of nowhere, I just remember that my love and hype for Saints Row just disappeared, and it all started with Saints Row Agents of Mayhem. When I got that game, I felt like the whole franchise just fell off, and out of love for this franchise, I realized it needed a whole video explaining the start, the rise, the peak, and the fall off. So pay attention, and here we go. The start. So the first game launched in 2006, and surprisingly it blown up, selling over 500,000 in the first month of the release. And the fact that this game was an Xbox 360 exclusive, yeah, I cannot imagine that too, makes these numbers even more impressive. Just imagine selling 500,000 copies of a game that's just an exclusive for one console that wasn't that popular at that time. I mean, it was, but it was still nowhere near PlayStation. Before its release, actually, when the demo launched, it had over 400,000 downloads in just the first week. Just imagine a demo having that much downloads for a start of the franchise. Like, you're starting something new, community doesn't know what you're gonna release, and you release a demo and it has over 400,000 downloads in the first week. That's just impressive. So the first Saints Row game in its lifetime sold over 2 million copies, which was also a very big number for a new franchise. And let's be honest, nobody knew if people would like. I mean, yeah, we had GTA, and this game was really compared to GTA a lot, because every game that has the similar concept to GTA, of course, is going to be called the GTA ripoff or the new GTA, at least at the beginning. But anyway, selling 2 million copies in its lifetime for the first game of the franchise is just something not many studios and not many games can do. And the biggest thing that made all this achievable was that GTA games at that time were still releasing on older consoles and didn't have any new upgrades like on consoles like PS2 and stuff like that. So Saints Row was kind of like GTA 5 but for 2006, because we all know GTA 5 was like a new gen game that everybody was excited for it. We got a lot new stuff, and really we haven't had a game that great, I can say it, since GTA 5. But Saints Row achieved all this because players could experience massive new gen upgrades, including no loading screens, which is genuinely impressive. Like, how could have they managed to do that at 2006? I mean, we still have games that require some weight on loading screens. The draw distance was very good, so when players would have traveled across the city or anywhere, they could have seen a lot of stuff in front of them, which you wasn't able to in GTA San Andreas and games like that. And also it had improved physics, which was one of the freshest improvements of all of these. But with all of this being said, we can now slowly move on to the rise of this franchise. The rise. So the rise happened with the release of the second game. The game was no longer just a GTA clone or a GTA ripoff or new GTA, and it had its fan base that only seemed to be rising and going upwards. Specifically, when GTA 4 released, Rockstar changed its arcade fun style to slower and kind of more realistic style. And if you ever played or seen GTA 4, you know what I'm talking about. But Saints Row 2 was kind of what GTA Online today is, but only more accepted, because you gotta understand this. The thing with GTA Online, the reason people don't like all futuristic stuff in it that much is because the main story has none of that, and it drew this picture of realism, and that's where Saints Row 2 won, since it had all that in its main story, which games like GTA 5 couldn't do. But still, it had some brutal realism, and we can say a good balance between both. Saints Row 3 was the game that, on the other hand, started the peak of this franchise, with changing the street gang style to making the main characters literally global icons. They literally had their energy drinks, they had their clothing, they had even movie deals, which made everyone who played it feel like a celebrity criminal. And I remember that I love this game. And this game had one of the best entrances. Like, you start the game robbing a bank wearing a mask of basically yourself, which is just something crazy that I as a kid couldn't process, but still I remember it was pretty fun. And I remember that I thought that was GTA. Like, at that time, I don't think I played any GTA games, maybe a little bit of GTA San Andreas, but I literally thought that was the GTA, so I thought that was even bigger than GTA. I thought GTA was like a Saints Row ripoff. I don't know if you're gonna believe me, but it's real. And for sure, we cannot forget the way they perfected co-op in this game, but more importantly, we absolutely cannot forget one of the most iconic, in my opinion, game trailers ever, with Kanye West's Power as a leading song in that trailer. That trailer was so fucking good. But still, the franchise didn't reach its peak with the third entrance, even though many people think it did. It actually happened with the biggest out of all, Saints Row 4. The peak. It's 2013 and most anticipated Saints Row game just released, peaking its sales its mechanics, and everything else that you can imagine that a Saints Row game should have had. You see, this Saints Row game was like none before because developers took a huge gamble, and when I say huge gamble, they really took a huge gamble, and basically instead of fighting gangs and doing stuff like that, robbing banks and all that you were doing in the Saints Row games before, the boss became the president of the US and suddenly the alien invasion happened. Yeah, my reaction to that was crazy, and I thought this game was pretty bad. And then I played it a little bit later after my kid years, and I think it's pretty good right now. Basically, we're trapped in a Matrix-like simulation fighting aliens with superpowers like super jump, super speed. We had all this amazing stuff. This game sold over 1 million copies in its first week alone. Now, that doesn't seem like anything crazy since what GTA 6 did with pre-orders in only one day is 100 times, even 1,000 times more than this. But still, at that time, you gotta understand it's 2013 and the social media isn't that big. So the only way you could have known about some new games is through some internet blogs or maybe some YouTube videos. And also, this game is the highest reviewed Saints Row game to this day. Not even one Saints Row game has been reviewed this high. This game was full of memes and funny weapons and stuff you could do in it that was genuinely entertaining. And then the Get Out of Hell expansion for Saints Row 4 released, which was the last game before the critical fallout. And if I'm being honest, it was an absolutely must-have expansion because it was comedic and hilarious in so many ways. But as we all know, every game franchise eventually leads to a big fall off, and with Saints Row, it happened in probably the worst time because this was the only competitor to GTA which was actually, if we're being honest, good, and the social media just started rising. And for games, social media is one of the biggest things where you can promote your game, and it was 2017 when the fallout started, so they could have promoted this game so good if it didn't flop that bad. The fall off, it all began with the release of the 5th Saints Row game, which wasn't even called that. Agents of Mayhem was a spin-off that ruined the whole franchise. You see, they did everything they could. Street gangs, shootouts, funny jokes. Finally, I switched to something new with Saints Row 4. But they lost options and did one of the worst things they could have done. They basically switched a single-player hero swapping concept based on a very popular game at that time, Overwatch. You of course know it. They completely removed co-op, vehicle customization, and everything made Saints Row special. But hear me out, that still wasn't the whole disaster for the company, because the 2022 game called Saints Row Reboot was released. Now this was one of the most annoying and cringy and the worst game out of every Saints Row game. Yes, even the 5th game was not bad as this. Yeah, I mean, you could say that they brought back some elements of the legendary games, but it wasn't funny anymore, or not even exciting, or it didn't even feel the same. The worst thing isn't even that they failed to reboot the series, but the fact that they released the game in a totally unplayable state. I'm talking like this game was lagging, crashing, it had outdated driving mechanics, which all these things were just unacceptable for a franchise this big. Even though they spent $100 million. Yes, $100 million fucking dollars on this game. They still couldn't recover and revive the series, which is genuinely so sad. With all this being said, I want to know what you think about this franchise and which was your favorite game out of 7. I gotta go with Saints Row 3. Tell me in the comments what you think.